Today we're going to be making a fixed eye loop using the Locked Brummel Splice. For this I'll be using a 1/8 inch thick piece of amsteel. You'll also need a children's needle, a pair of scissors, some sort of marking tool. I'll be using a pen. A marker is probably what you want to go with though, and a ruler or measuring tape. So to start off, I like to make my first measurement at about 10 inches. So I'm going to measure out 10 inches and put my mark right here. Okay, that mark is where your amsteel is actually going to pass back through itself. Okay, so the next mark we want to make, after we've determined how big we want to make our fixed eye loop, actually, as you can see, when you pull this through, the loop that this makes here is your fixed eye. So let's say if you want to make your eye about this big, you'll need to come out another couple of inches, and that's where you want to put your second mark right here. So I'm going to put my second mark right there. Okay. So now, this is the first mark I made. This is the second. So what we're going to do now is we're going to thread the amsteel through our children's needle. So what you'll want to do is de-thread your amsteel by about 3 or 4 threads, maybe even 5. I'll probably pull out 5 just to make it easier on myself. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, 4, and 5. So now I've made my amsteel incredibly thinner on this end, and I've got all these extra pieces hanging off. So we'll take our scissors, and you have to pull it kind of tight. And we'll just cut off the pieces that we pulled out. Alright. Now we want to thread our needle. So let's get these as flat as possible and put it through like so. Okay. Now what you want to do is go back to those markings that we made earlier. Remember, this is our first mark that we made at about 10 inches, and this is our second one that we made after we determined how big we wanted our fixed eye to be. So I'm going to take this needle and I'm going to pass the amsteel back through the first mark. So if you push the amsteel together, it kind of opens up and you can kind of see through it. So then you want to work your needle between the threads. It's important to note that you want to make sure that you get the same amount of threads on each side of the needle. So if you're using a 12-strand piece of amsteel, you want to make sure that you get 6 threads on each side. That's going to make sure that it has the maximum amount of weight supportage. So I'll just go ahead and pull this through. It opens up pretty good. And like that. Now, this loop right here, this is what I was talking about earlier. This makes your fixed eye. So you want to pull this through until your second marking that you made has come through. So it has. And I'm just going to de-thread the needle. Now we want to do the same thing on this end of the amsteel that we did to this end. We're just going to pull out about 4 or 5 of these threads just to make it easier for us to thread our needle. So there's 1. There's 2. Let's see, there's 3. 4. And I'm going to go ahead and do a 5th one. You may not want to. I mean, it's just personal preference. So then we'll trim off this excess that we just de-threaded. Alright. Now we'll take the needle, and we'll thread this through here. Let's pull that through. Okay, so now we've got our needle threaded again. So now we go back to this end where we had made our second marking. Where did I make my mark? Oh, there it is. Second mark. Now, we want to pass this end of the amsteel through that marking. So again, being very careful not to get too many threads on one side. You also want to make sure that you don't split any of the threads with the needle. That'll weaken your knot as well. If you're having trouble, you can always just push the amsteel together a little bit and it'll just open it up, make some holes. There we go. So I'll just pull this on through. Like so. Alright. So now we've got this neat little formation happening here. As we pull it tighter, these two ends that we pass the rope through will get closer and closer. So, and that's exactly what you want to happen. So you just pull these tight, like that. Okay? So that's pretty tight there. Let's see, your eye's fixed. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to create the berry and pass the tail through it. So we'll go back to this end and you'll actually take your needle, let me take it off of this end, and you'll start it in the amsteel just under your knot. So I'm going to go in about here. We're actually going to pass it through the center of the amsteel and not come out the other side this time. So you want to open up your amsteel, and amsteel is hollow down the center. So this, once you get it in there, it should be fairly easy just to kind of work it down the center. If at any point you start pushing through and it comes out the other side, just back it up a little, open up your amsteel, and just continue to work it down the center. You'll probably see me do this several times throughout this demonstration. So once I've got my needle in the amsteel, what you want to do is take these threads that are left on this loose end and pass them back through the eye. So just flatten those out so they'll pass through the eye of our needle. And we'll pull it through like so. Okay, then you're going to work your needle on down through the center, creating your berry. And what you want to do is effectively pull this other end inside of here. That's why it's called a berry, because you're burying this end inside. So you just kind of have to work the amsteel up the needle and just kind of milk it over the other end. Sometimes it can be a little hard to hold on to the needle inside of the amsteel, but it's not too hard. As you can see, as I just keep working it, it'll eventually go over the threaded end of the needle. So you just kind of milk it on over. This is probably the most difficult part out of the entire process. So far it's been pretty easy. But once you get the threaded end of the needle inside of the amsteel, it becomes a lot easier. See, what you can actually do is work the needle, just get it and push it on down. And you want to go down further in length on the amsteel than this tail was. So once we've gone far enough down, we'll push the needle back out through a hole, and then we can just pull it on through. So then you can grab a hold of the needle and just kind of make it a little easier to pull that through. Now, as you can see, that's pulling on in. Okay, so we'll work this down till the end of our needle comes out. See, you can see it's starting to come out right there. That's where we threaded it. There we go. So now here's the end that we pulled through the middle of our amsteel. I'll give it one last good tug just to make sure it's tight. Come back to this end and milk the amsteel back down. And as you can see, the end that we passed through at this end is now lost inside of here. Now you've got a pretty snug loop. I mean, this is not going to come undone. So there you go. That's how you make a fixed loop using a locked Brummel splice.